Okay, we are live. Are you ready?
You betcha.
All right, just to give it one more second.
Sure.
Cool. Okay, let's see. People will start 4:30. All right, cool. So, hey everybody, we are going to jump straight into it today. Thank you so much for tuning in for this Wednesday happy hour. You are tuned in to the Crude Audacity podcast, the podcast that talks shop shit and all things strategy with oil patch influencers. I am Catherine Mills, and today's segment is our Petroleum Underground segment, where we address all topics in energy that make you stop and say, what the what? Before I jump into our guest today, I would like to give a huge shout out to our sponsors. They are the Denver International Petroleum Society and Rare Petro, two great organizations. Rare Petro actually has their own podcast and definitely a resource for cutting edge news in the oil field. So be sure to check them out. And then the Denver International Petroleum Society, DIPS, as we like to call it around town here, just a great resource. So please go give them a shout out. Tell them Catherine sent you. So guys, I am so thrilled today. I'm sure you saw it on LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram and basically written in the sky, because today for the Petroleum Underground, I get to combine two of my favorite topics, and those are geology and murder.
You're scaring me.
Our guest today is Mr. Jim Reed. He is a geologist by trade, director of R&D at Rockware, and in his spare time, he hunts serial killers. So, Jim, how are you doing today?
Well, I have a bone to pick with you. Actually, it's my fault. I sent you the I sent you the goofy picture of me with a beard. And when my wife saw that, as you see, I had to trim it back, and I was really going for that Michelangelo God in the Sistine Chapel flowing beard look. So it cost me my deity. So.
Well, I actually asked the guys around here if that was a serious picture, or if I should ask for another one, and they all voted to use it. So blame Surtac.
I will. I
shall. You loved it.
So, that's
well,
great.
I gotta say, you are the first influencer I've had the pleasure of interviewing who has a chalkboard behind him.
Which I just erased all the super secret information back there from our last meeting. You know, things like make this program work. So, but just in case we need it, it's there. So.
Yeah, well, I kind of wish you had left the secret sauce up there. That would have been a lot of fun. But before we begin and jump into it, because I know everyone is excited for your tales of murder, and I know you've got some good ones, but how did you get started in geology? Like, just take us through it a little bit. Let us know sort of why rocks?
Well, I started out as an accounting major at the University of Wyoming, and had a fraternity brother who was a geologist, and he took me out hiking, and this whole thing that he could see the world with different eyes, things that, and all these words and stuff. And it was, it kind of caught my interest. And then I had to take a science requirement. So, Rocks for Jocks 101, taught by a guy named Don Boyd, who just, I looked him up this afternoon. He just passed away this year, but this guy was a multimedia extravaganza. He would come in and draw these beautiful 3D block diagrams, and he'd have a grad student on the projector on the slide thing, and he was just captivating. And I blame him. I should have sued him, but I could have been an accountant. And so anyway, but that guy really got me going. And then, so I switched majors, moved to Washington University in St. Louis, where another mentor, a guy named Ray Arvidsson, who's the head of the Viking or the Mars surface stuff, took me under his wing. I really went after planetary geology. And then I took a break. I took a summer job. I took a summer job. It was a temporary thing, just temporary. And I went to a company called Freeport in Tucson and did field exploration in the Southwest, Southern California, New Mexico, Arizona, and just fell in love with field work. And so then I moved to a company called Amex, and did the same thing in Northern California, and ended up in the Trans-Pecos, a little sliver of the Rockies running down through West Texas, and switched over to a company we had a joint venture with called Wold, a guy named John Wold based in Casper, who became
I know.
he's a god, and he and then so I went from working with him. I switched over to uranium, and then started doing industrial minerals. Got into a talc deposit right there about 90 miles southeast of El Paso, and just fell in love with the structure. And it was very successful. We got a whole mess of it, and finally I basically fired myself because there was no need anymore. They had 19 million tons, a 20-year resource, and so I realized I could never work for anybody else after Wold. It was such a love affair. So I started Rockware, and I'd been carting along an Apple II with me for years. And I like program. I got started in the programming back in the NASA days, and so it was kind of a natural fit. But that's my resume condensed into a little $20.
So you combine geology with coding in order to build Rockware.
Yes, very much so. Yeah.
So tell us, who is Rockware exactly? Because I know you're one of the founding fathers. So exactly what do y'all do? What do you provide? Because you're not just oil field specific.
Yeah. Oh no. We started out with oh boy, I'm trying to think here. It was a program called Logger that was that actually started out in the talc days, because talc drills very fast. And so before I knew it, I was 100 holes behind on logging holes. Then I needed to do resource calculations. So anyway, so started Rockware with this log plotting program at I think it was like $100 or something, and then we got into contouring, and so then we started reselling other people's programs and hiring people. Yeah, we're geo sluts, and so we from there the first 12 years, this was 83 forward. So for the first 12 years, it was truly magical. Every month was a record month. And this is going to sound bad, but people buy anything. It was like if you had a program that converted Fahrenheit to Celsius, somebody would buy it. So
yeah, probably.
Because it was new and exciting, and PCs were really taking off, and so we ended up with 22 products. Staring nets, rose diagrams, Piper diagrams, basically things that are tedious to draw by hand or to calculate by hand, like volumetrics. And so along, what was, I guess, the late 90s, this evil thing called the internet came along, and people were basically introducing all sorts of free software on the internet. Every professor, grad student was putting free software up on the. So we had to get honest about really putting some distance between ourselves and what you can get for free. And then so went to it was, I think, an MIT business forum where the head developer for Lotus, which was at that time the first guys to come out with a real commercial spreadsheet called Lotus 123 that preceded Microsoft Excel. This guy was given the keynote, and he said, "You should have one product per billion of revenue." So I got out the calculator, and I did the math on all of our sales and decided we needed one product because we're a little bit less than a billion. And so so that was a big transition for us. And then consolidating all these products into one, except for the log plotting program, we've kept that separate. And that's what begot RockWorks as from Rockware. So now I think it was about 2002 we started getting into consulting, just enough to kind of, it was really kind of kicking and screaming where customers were saying, I don't want to learn this thing. Can you do it for me using your software? Because I want to do what you're doing. So, so we became a consulting company in addition, and I think we do just enough to make sure we're always still using the software. And I like to joke that we want to use it enough so that we hate it just as much as everybody else. But we can do something about it in terms of refining it and improving it. And it's probably been the best thing that ever happened to the program. So that's the Rockware story. Yeah. So.
Well, y'all just did a big release the other week, yeah?
We did, and we.
What was that?
Well,
what was that?
It's the last 3 years of my life, as well as 9 other people, and we basically kind of rewrote it, rewrote the whole interface and a lot of the engine, and the big push for it was to improve the workflow. And what we're finding is that people will visit these applications, and this doesn't apply just to Rockworks. I think it applies to a lot of vertical applications where you get a job, you use it, and then you forget about it. And then you come back 6 months later and you've got to kind of relearn it, especially as you get older. And so
you're talking software.
Yes. And well, maybe it could apply to other stuff, but it's but still it's something where we really wanted to focus on that. So we came up with this concept of a playlist, something where you could say, okay, the first thing I do, I got to make a base map. And so you say, you get a nice map and it's all pretty looking. You add that to the playlist, and then you say, now I want to do, show 3D logs, and now I want to show, a blob. I want to, do a model, and then on and on. And so, when you think about a big consulting report, you can have a lot of steps that go into it. So by putting them all into the playlist, we did 2 things. Number one is we basically, somebody can come back to the project, add some new data, and just press one button and reprocess the whole 9 yards. The other, I think, place where it's having some traction is if you go into any shop, any of our clients, let's say it's 12 people. Usually, Bill down the hall, he's an expert with Rockworks, but the other folks, they don't know how to use it. They may have licenses for it, but they don't want to learn it. So Bill does all the work for him, and then Bill will, but now Bill can say, here's the playlist that I used. Put your data into the program, press the playlist, come back in a day, and it'll be done. And when I say that about a day, some of these, the other thing we've been getting into a lot more is dynamic models with the, thinking of all of our different markets. There's the one that really wants to see data that changes over time is the environmental market with contamination, plume migration over time. We've just finished up a monster project with 32 years of data in a
32 years of data.
Yeah, I can't say where it is. It's a college town in Michigan that starts with Ann and ends with Arbor. So
what does it rhyme with? I'm sorry.
No, it's actually it's public knowledge that the city of Ann Arbor has a large trichloroethylene plume moving towards the city, and it's really to see it. Yeah, so it's very dramatic when you see these blobs moving through space. But to produce those blobs and to morph them to make intermediate models. Imagine if you're doing a reservoir model in petroleum, and but you need to do, let's say, 1,000 of them as it's changed over time. And when I say
security,
yeah, exactly. So, but with this thing, what we're going for is the idea that you press a button and you go to sleep and you come back and you've got a really cool animated video that you can impress people with. And so, so that's been a big deal for us. And then we've been a lot of redesign of the menus. A lot of our users don't English is a second language. About 60% of our sales are out of the country, and so we're putting in a lot of, this is an ongoing thing of adding little cartoons. And the most important thing for all the menus is a little video button. So you can press the button and a quick video will come up saying, do this, do that, do this. And we got that idea from the military where you can be driving an Abrams tank, and if the engine fails, some soldier can pull out his phone, click on a barcode thing, and it will trigger a video to come up on how to, change the turbocharger on this engine. Which
I didn't know the military did that.
Oh yeah. There's all sorts of videos for doing everything. Arming a nuclear missile. So there's.
I would actually really enjoy that one.
Yeah.
I'm trying to be a dictator one day.
That it's been a long 3 years, but we're very excited about it. So
that's awesome. Well, hopefully everyone listening will go check out Rockware. But Jim, I gotta ask, what do you think of today's oil field environment, today's energy environment?
Well, I'm old enough to have lived through previous events like this, and when I look at my friends, well, actually, I'll give you I give a talk to law enforcement investigators on the similarities between geology and crime scene investigations or homicide investigations. There's a lot that we have in common with these guys, and specifically, it's the ability to put a lot of emotional investment into something. You've got to play. I've got this feel. I know this is going to pan out. We're going to do this wildcat well here. We're going to be filthy rich. So you go out there with a rig, you drill a really expensive hole, and nothing happens. It's dry.
All the time.
Now, mere mortals would kill themselves, but geologists have the ability to just say, well, I tried. I'll learn from it, and I'll pick myself up, and I'll go do it again.
Yeah, geologists are spin doctors. It was an
experiment. Oh yeah,
it was. It wasn't a total loss. Look at the science.
No. So we're kind of different, and but what I've noticed is that homicide investigators, they invest a lot into evidence, a clue, and so they pursue that clue, only to find out that it's a dead end. And so, immediately they just pick themselves up. They go off to the next clue, and they just keep bouncing along and doing it. So there's a lot of commonalities with that. And in this environment right now, this is a test of who can bounce. Now, you may have to bounce into something that isn't petroleum, but is related. And so what I've noticed because we've been forced to have since day one, all these different markets. We've got things like I would say mining it was probably our oldest or has been one of our longest term markets. That's just because I kind of came from that background, and those guys. When I look at the commonalities between say oil and gas exploration and mining, well, in the last 10, 20 years, we've seen that there is a relationship. I mean, you can take take a line from, Weld County down through, Wattenberg and keep going. Where do you end up? You end up in the Colorado mineral belt. So,
yes.
Fractures, hydrothermal fluids, hydrocarbon maturation, it's all tied together. It's all, it's all kind of one and the same. So I don't, I think we've got a lot to offer. I know that when I look at things like, I did make some notes of some ideas on, commonalities. Think about it. Oh, sorry.
Transferable skill sets, because you going from geology to murder is probably the best transferable skill set I've ever heard of.
Well, concepts like anomalies, those are very geologic. But yeah, a lot of this thing of doing career, shifts through time. guys with no hair in geology, we've moved around quite a bit, and so this is sort of old hat. But when I think about stuff like fluids moving through rocks, I mean, fluids moving through rocks are fluids moving through rocks. So be they things of low viscosity or high viscosity, water, oil, and so yeah, blood. And so we call them body fluids. So but the deal is, my counsel to friends who are looking at some scary stuff right now is don't sell yourself short. You've got this huge array of skills that can well transfer and benefit some of these other markets like mining.
Yeah.
Or hydrology, or environmental contamination plume stuff, geothermal, geotechnical is a big market. It's definitely something to consider because just between us, engineers don't know everything, so.
I would disagree. I will argue with anybody about just about anything.
So I've got a mug for you for my grandson, a petroleum engineer. I forget what it says, but it's something to the effect of, don't correct me, I'm a petroleum engineer. And so I'm losing the translation, but
I might use that.
Yeah.
Don't correct me, I'm an engineer.
But
in the terms of transferable skill sets, I know Rockware, just to get it out there, y'all offer a bunch of free classes to the geo community. So tell us a little bit about that before we jump into the blood, guts, and gore.
I should say that our when we started doing the free classes, that was totally self-serving. We were
marketing.
Yeah, and we weren't. We were charging for classes and making some money off those, but what we've found after 37 years is that what we call shelfware. Somebody buys the program, they can't figure it out, they put it on the shelf. That doesn't sell products. It's and we have tried. We spent millions of dollars on marketing over the years, and what we've found is that the only truth, the single thing that we've come to rely on is word of mouth. And
yeah,
hey,
welcome to a podcast.
Yeah, exactly. So how did you do that? How did you make that diagram? How did you calculate that thing? And so if people ain't using it, we lose. So by doing these free classes, we're essentially trying to sort of, for lack of a better term, create disciples or evangelists, and it's paid off well. We'll never charge for another class. Well, we do charge for on-site classes, but these free classes in Golden or in Switzerland or someplace where we can get a bunch of different clients together, like Atlanta or something, we'll continue to do those for free for as long as I'm around. So that.
How do people sign up for them? Do they just check the website?
Yeah. Get on our mailing list, and we'll send you, announcements or check the website. And we don't sell our mailing lists except to religious groups, and so.
Politicians, right? That's
we sell to the political parties. So
we can get into political parties later, because I will argue about that too. But getting into the real reason that everyone is here today, the reason I am so excited, tell us about your murder group, because I can't even, when I was told that you did geology, modern day oil field geology techniques to find murder victims and catch serial killers, it's a dream come true. It's two of my favorite subjects. So what is this group you were in? Who, what, when, where, how?
I lied. I made that all up. Sorry.
Great, thanks.
Sorry. I couldn't resist. No, sorry. Okay. So the history of the group, it's called Necrosearch, and Necrosearch. And it got started back in 86 when a geophysicist, I can't even say that word, geophysicist named Clark
Davenport. They can't say it either.
Yeah, that's true. So a geophys named Clark Davenport, who was, I think, at Abasco at the time. Clark, there was a big high-profile case going on in eastern Colorado. Mike McCormick and his dad ran this ranch, and they had found out that, or what they would do is they'd pick up winos down in downtown Denver. They'd take them out to their ranch and have them work, and then when it came payday, they would kill and bury them.
Okay.
Now, as an employer, I think that's pretty cool, but but it's illegal, so I don't do it.
Never have. Because everyone should take note of that.
Yeah. So anyway,
it works out pretty well.
Yeah. It's so anyway, so Clark's watching the news, and Clark's always been a grumpy guy, and Clark's saying those idiots, they're tearing up evidence. They should use geophysics, blah blah blah. And his son's sitting next to him, and his son gets fed up and says, "Dad, why don't you do something about it?" So the next day, he goes.
Stop bothering me. Go outside.
Yeah, exactly. And so he goes into the office, and the next day, and calls the sheriff out there, and gets a surly receptionist who says, "All right, I'll pass your message along." And so Clark, being an idiot, says, "Well, you just tell the sheriff I have information that will lead to the discovery of those bodies," not realizing what he's just said. And so within about 30 minutes, he's surrounded by people with guns. And so they drag him out to the site. He meets up with a guy named coroner from Arapahoe County named Jack Swanberg, a blood spatter guy named Griff Griffin from Colorado Bureau of Investigation. Okay. They bring in a forensic anthropologist named Diane France from Fort Collins, and they go out to lunch, and this group is born. So they start recruiting, and hold
on. Go through those ologies one more time. I heard blood spatter.
Oh, we got a lot more than that. We got ologies I had never heard of, things like I didn't know what serology was, body fluid, stuff, which has moved into DNA, but still you've got all sorts of. But anyway, we've got special decomposition dogs. We've got I printed out a list somewhere. Well, anyway, it's lots of geology, geophysics. We got scavenger specialists, animal. I've done 2 cases in the last 30 days where we're building up a library of maps of the distribution of remains associated with animal scavenging, coyotes, bears, and stuff. And for example, if you dump a body on the ground surface on Rampart Ridge, look within 100 meters of the first bone discovery. If it's on the side of Green Mountain, look 600 meters within, from where the first bone was discovered. And so we're trying to build up basically a catalog of all sorts of stuff that we can, pass on to law enforcement. And it's, but some of these other, behavioral psychology.
Why are we all so nuts?
Yeah. That yeah, which has helped us. But but things like, was the suspect the kind of person who would want to, quote, own the body? Are they going to put it on their own property? Are they going to go far away? Are they a digger? Or are they somebody who's lazy? Some of these things are really do affect the exploration model. And I see this in the same way as if you were to look at, doing hydrocarbon exploration, it would be nice to look at places where the land is available. And so, so GIS, of just basically ruling places out is crucial, but to GIS based on the suspect, on their behavioral profile, their psychological profile, is really, really important. So we've we teamed up with way back about 15 years ago with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and they've become members of the group. And so we've worked a lot with them. They've got, a really good data set that I look at as being basically another exploration filter, like, a Venn diagram on a map.
Okay.
Light tables that we used to use in the old days, like if you overlaid porosity, permeability, et cetera, on a map, and then look for the sweet spot.
It's the pH.
It's exactly the same. Nothing has changed. It's just
so you're overlaying maps to find the sweet spot to bury a body.
Yes.
Or no. And getting rid of bodies is incredibly difficult.
Yeah, that's why people bury them.
Because
they're hard to find.
So what is the best murder cover-up option? Where should we hide bodies? Asking for a friend.
That's a political question.
We'll find out soon.
Yeah, Catherine, you've just triggered a rant that you don't want to go down. So at this rabbit hole. But no, I get asked this question a lot, and that is, how would you do it? And
how would you do it?
Just do it. Average prison term is going to be 5 years. You're going to catch up with a lot of your correspondence, and it's actually the system's broke. We've got a guy, a case I did in 2017. He's coming up for parole this year. And but now getting more serious about it. With that political message, out of the way. The reality is, if you've got enough attention, scientific attention focused on you, it's tough. It's, especially with, think about like anybody who's had surgery is going to have, tantalum clips or, other devices that aren't part of the natural environment. Any place you bury somebody, you're going to disturb the environment. You can't, this is kind of Heisenberg. You can't bury a body without messing up the environment. So, we're looking for disturbances in the stratigraphy, in the same way that, try to hide an asteroid impact in the Yucatan. You can't hide it.
The dinosaurs.
They're gonna find it. You're gonna find the evidence of this impact in the same way that if you dig a hole, we're all used to thinking of stratigraphy as, the Skull Creek and, the Denver Formation. Well, just reduce the scale down, and look at A horizon, B horizon, C horizon, D horizon. Not only when you dig a hole, are you disturbing the stratigraphy, but you're really messing up with the electrical field, the conductivities as you churn this stuff up. And so, in terms of dielectric constants of these different soil horizons, you can't dig a hole without messing it up. So that's the, anything beyond that, as far as getting into more details, we save that we do a 1 week class for law enforcement, and I need to reserve that because we do have, some of these whack jobs in prison do watch, I hate to say it, watch shows like this, or they're very, they got nothing else to do. And so we don't. TV. But yeah. And and it works both ways. I've seen a lot of cops who get good ideas off these crime shows. So yeah. Except there's a thing called the CSI effect that's very real. And that is
everyone thinks that they're a criminal hunter.
Well, it comes up in court, where the juror will pass a note to the judge saying, did they do n-dimensional hyperspace eigenvector analysis of the double Fourier, trace element geochemistry, blah blah blah, and the poor cops are going, what the hell are they?
Yeah, what the hell?
Yeah, I saw it on a show the other night, and DNA is a great example.
Okay.
DNA solves. How many cases does DNA solve on TV? 100%. It's 100% effective. In real life, I got to hold on, see if I can see it. 6% of cases are solved with DNA. DNA turnaround on TV is before the next commercial. Well, in real life, it's 6 months plus, and so there's some unrealistic expectations that are coming out of this. But at the same time, I still think it's a good thing that people are, at least it's churning ideas and getting people thinking about this stuff. But it's there's a lot to it. So
is your group finding bodies? Are you coming in on active cases? Are you brought in when they've gotten far enough to start finding a killer, or they've just run into a brick wall? And are you going all over the United States? Is this
all over the world? We've done stuff in Australia, Russia, the UK. It's definitely an international endeavor, and we're trying to set up sister organizations to work with us on stuff. But going back to the original question of cold cases versus hot stuff and all that, the answer is yes, all of the above. That typically they're cold cases, but just recently, last week I was on one that's May 10th, and so
last week,
yeah, that's that one was very it's everything, but our models are really designed for, I would say, for cold cases. Yeah, and that's because that way we can take a little bit more time to acquire data, do some more planning, as opposed to somebody, calling up and saying, "Can you be here for a meeting at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning?" And so that's, that's kind of fun, but actually it's a lot of fun.
Away to somewhere in Europe to go hunt serial killers. Yeah, that sounds like a good time.
Yeah. And Kayla, I should mention that, Catherine, sorry, that we're not necessarily, the serial cases are kind of few and far between.
I would hope so.
Yeah. We did Bundy way back when the group first formed, but he wasn't a real burying kind of guy. And but since then we've done several serial types who are people who like to bury things. But typically these are crimes of passion. It's usually some guy goes ape and kills his wife, buries her in the backyard. It's I would say that's more typical. And the serial ones, I did one last summer in Michigan, 6 girls, and and the problem with 6, at least 6, and the problem with those is that when I mentioned the behavioral psychologist, we've there's more victims than the victim, and that those are the ones where if you get emotionally involved in those, I quit the group for like a year once when a guy got under my skin and then realized I missed it too much. But there is a psychological toll. When I do the recruiting, I say you're gonna have all this fun, it's gonna be action, adventure, excitement, but from time to time it's gonna catch you. And you're going to, and it's going to mess with your head. And so what we've started doing is keeping an eye on each other. And so I'm trying to do, there we go. Keep an eye on each other. And the role of humor is paramount. And in fact, if we have somebody who's interviewing for membership, if I don't see humor, I don't want to be around. That's scary. And it's, I'll tell you, we had a shrink once give us a talk about this topic, and he said he's talking about a one-car accident where a car had driven into a telephone pole, and the guy's dead, windows are down, engine's still running, so they come up, one cop on either side of the car. One cop reaches in to turn off the ignition, and as he does so, this hand grabs his wrist, and his friend says, "Hey, grab his eye," which was dangling out of the eye socket, "turn around and show him how screwed up he is." And so we all burst into laughter. The whole group, it was like 40 of us, just laughing. We thought this was the funniest story we'd ever heard. He said, "I made that story up to test you."
Oh, thank goodness.
And that was and so it does have a real role to play. Yeah. And the other nice thing about all these different disciplines in the group, it's very multidisciplinary, is that we get to make fun of each other. of our disciplines. And like, for example, I maintain that all endeavors, all sciences are sub-sciences of the geosciences. So,
Oh,
geophysics,
so we're lesser
geoengineering.
scientists.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
So you engineers, you're just a
We're
subset.
just data
Yeah.
pushers. We're Excel junkies. You don't need us.
Yeah. So it's true. Anyway, that's my
Well,
that's
I'm
so
glad you bring that up because even though I'm super excited, I know everyone watching is super excited to hear your story. It is a very real thing. There is a traumatic toll. Someone did lose their life. So, it's very real and we have to be respectful of that. But this is not a respectful question and I do apologize. But who is your favorite serial killer? You said you worked a bunch of states. I mean, you knew it was coming.
well, I've got a guy who I'm not sure if I was half serious about this or not. I asked if I could come to his execution if they allow capital punishment in Colorado again. But it's Scott Kimball. He's up in Sterling right now, and he's I've met Edward Teller, the father of the H bomb, the smartest human, the guy who invented Star Wars for Reagan, and
Yeah,
and
I
Scotty.
read a book on that.
Oh, cool! But Scott is smarter than him in terms of interpersonal. He can manipulate people. Um, One of the things I've noticed about him, and going back to an old case of, I forget his name. He's dead now, thank goodness. But anyway, charming people, very charming people, ladies' man, and they have the ability to look at you, figure out what makes you tick. And so I remember I had to spend 2 days in the field with this guy, and we're walking along through a canyon in Utah, and a little box canyon, and he said, "Hey Jim, are these cyclothem deposits?" I said, "Cyclothem? Why, yes, they are." And I start getting into explaining all this stuff, and realize I'm talking to a serial murderer, and and I realized he got inside my head, and so in terms of
Geologists can be distracted so easily with yeah.
yeah, just it's true. Yeah, it's like a laser pointer and a cat, It's
Exactly.
like,
That's good to know, especially for us engineers.
yeah. All right, so we go off topic, but it's just something occupational hazard. But in terms of scary guys, the one I did last year in Michigan was of course I've never met him. I've watched his interview videos ad nauseum, and he's a scary guy. I would say favorite's the bad or the wrong word. Scariest would be they're all scary people. Sociopaths, it's not that they have something we don't have. It's that they don't have something we do have, which is empathy and compassion. And so it gives them actually a very big advantage in some ways for doing horrible things, whereas the normal human would say, I can't do this anymore, right? Or it just it's I'd rather die than do this kind of stuff. But they don't have that. So it's there's a Voltaire quote. I'm going to butcher it. Sometimes when you look into the abyss looks back at you. And so when you're talking to these people, trying to get inside their heads, you got to look inside your own head too, because we're all capable of horrible things. But it's that that chunk of gray matter that we have that they don't, that says no, I'm not going there. And so that's that gets kind of heavy. But
Interesting.
yeah. So I don't want to think about that.
So. Well, tell us what's the best case you've worked? Can you tell us one of your stories? Are you able to go through all of it?
Yeah, we can talk about any case that is closed, has gone to trial, and I think actually I think the ones where I've had a lot of fun have been where they do go all the way, because we also provide expert testimony, and and so bear in mind that and I'm going to get off topic and come back to your question, but one of the a typical homicide investigator is going to encounter one clandestine grave in their entire career. And so statistically, so what do? You call the local university, and they send out a professor and who is well-intentioned, good people, very very well educated, but they've never been they may not have the experience in terms of chain of custody, evidence handling, dealing with the press, and
to reality, we face that problem too.
Yes. So and like, oh, we need to set up a baseline study that will take 2 years, and no. We got 48 hours. And so they will basically so that's one thing that's going on. The next thing that goes on is that if you have a loved one that goes missing and it gets on the press, your phone will ring off the hook immediately with charlatans, psychics, dowsers. Psychics out the yin. Yeah, they saw it. I saw your little girl. I know where your little girl is. I saw it.
That's almost cruel.
Some of them actually believe what they're saying. Some of them are cruel, horrible people. But the thing they have in common is they're both full of baloney. And so dowsers, we've seen, and so the family will go to the cops and they'll say, oh, you got to hire this guy. He saw my girl. And so, the cops are just trying to, make, go along with it. So then once they fizzle, once all else fails, somebody will say, why not science? And so it's
the boring route. Why science?
What the heck? And so by the time we get there, they've already gone through, or typically by the time we get there, they've already gone through a bunch of this other mumbo jumbo. And what I've found from my mentors is that you got to take charge. You can't just act like a scientist. You got to start giving. In fact, when I arrive on scene, or if I'm at the airport, meeting the detectives, I'll make up stuff. I'll say, I'm going to need this. I'm going to need a 12-volt battery I'm going to need stakes this high. I've got all that stuff. I don't need any of that stuff. But you can see in the body language, you can see people just kind of relaxing, going, oh, this guy knows what he's doing. And if you do it long enough, eventually you realize one day, I do know what I'm doing, which is I can stop faking it. So, and I think that applies to a lot of endeavors in life. But anyway, getting back on track. To your question of a good case story, back in 2017, I got a call from the CBI and the Greeley Police Department. A guy back in oh God, it was, I thought I made some notes on this just so I don't get the dates wrong. Because I knew you were going to ask this. It was in 95. A young lady named Tina Sandoval had told her friend, I'm going to go meet with my soon-to-be ex-husband because it was tax time, it was April, and we need to finish some stuff so I can dump this guy and move on with my life. If you don't hear from me by tomorrow, call the cops. So next day, her friend called the cops.
Dangerous.
Pardon me?
She knew that he was dangerous.
Well, I don't know, but probably. But I don't think he'd had anything going on before then. But she knew he was a pervert, and so indeed she doesn't show up. The cops find him in his mom's house or something. He's got all his clothes in the washing machine at 3 a.m, and they catch him trying to sneak out a window. They get a conviction, a bodiless conviction, and then it was overturned by some nambe pambe. Sorry, okay, stay focused. Sorry, it was overturned. He went free. He moves to Nevada, gets. He's incarcerated for 2 felonies. So the Greeley Police Department, which are incredible people, incredibly good investigators, they go out there and talk with him, and they arrange a plea deal, and to find Tina, and from 97. So
they knew that she was dead or just missing?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. No, after a certain period of time, you know, people are dead. And so she, anyway, he tells him, well, you know, I used to work at this cemetery in Greeley, east of Greeley. And I, you know, I think I may have, you know, there was an open grave that night, and I may have, you know, she may have fallen in. And so, so we get the call, go out there, use the radar and ground penetrating radar to look at there were 3 open graves the night that she went missing in 97, according to the cemetery records, awaiting funerals the following day. And so one of the graves is a little bit deeper than the surrounding graves. And so we decided to do that one and arrange for an exhumation, which is where you basically take coffin out of the grave. It wasn't gross or gory or anything like that. It's they have
or leathery.
No, this was perfectly preserved because when they put down a concrete plate with beveled edges, inward beveled edges, this concrete plate, they put some spacers in for water, moisture, and then they put the coffin on top of that. And this was a metal coffin. And then they put a concrete bell over that. I don't know what it is about wanting to preserve our loved ones, but nevertheless,
effort.
Oh yeah. And when it's a big industry, and the morticians industry, I think, is one of the largest lobbyists in DC and in the state legislatures. So, but that's another rant. So that's rant number 722. So anyway, they take the bell off and pull the coffin was pristine. You can you could have used it right then and there. So they whisk the coffin out, and then they take the concrete plate off, and myself and another a guy from Necrosearch members, retired CBI guy named Griffin, the blood spatter guy. He jumps in, and we start doing the radar on the base of the grave. Well, lo and behold, on the east end, we're seeing all sorts of disturbances. We're looking at profiles that, you know, by the way, a GPR profile and a seismic profile look the same. So imagine looking at a seismic thing and you're seeing all jumbled stratigraphy on one end, and at the other end, nice layered stratigraphy, which answered the question of 2 questions. Where did he put the dirt? Because if he'd thrown it up on the surface, the cemetery people would have drawn some attention.
Yeah.
He put it behind him and in the grave. And number 2, it answered the question of when the night that they arrested him, why did he have a level in his car?
He did not.
Yeah, because if he had made the grave unlevel because of his previous work experience there, he knew that they would, you know, somebody would know, you know, something's weird. Somebody's messed with this grave. So, so we started digging on the anomaly, and at 18 inches, we found Tina. And, and that's when, you know, that's when I like to climb out of the grave and go smoke a cigar. Because I don't like gross stuff, but, that was that. And so, and the best part was we were invited to his sentencing, where, we got to.
You guys were all doing this?
Yeah, everybody who was on site. There was Diane France, who's our forensic anthropologist, and Griff, and myself. And so we got to you know, wave goodbye to John as they cuffed him or as they took him out manacled to go to prison. And then when I was getting ready for this this interview today, I pulled him. He comes up for parole this year. So,
good Lord.
which is okay. I'll stay calm. That's okay. So anyway, but
people in prisons for lesser things, so not to trigger you, but
yeah,
the system is very broken. That's not an argument. That's a reality.
I'm afraid so. But you know, the other ones, I think, you know, seeing the hydrology come into play has been a really cool thing. Of we drill monitor wells now. We've had 2 cases where cadaver dogs hit down hydrologic gradient from wherever the remains are. So we're trying to make subsurface maps to trace these body, these gases, these decomp gases up gradient to see where they're coming from. So we start putting in monitor wells. This is classic. I mean, there's no difference between doing this, finding the source of a contamination plume. So there's no difference. It's the only difference is that if like the one we did last year in Wyoming, with all these cops and everybody being so energized, in one weekend we put in 24 monitor wells and measured static water levels. If you had done that on an environmental site right now, you're looking at maybe $250,000.
Yeah.
So I remember pulling these guys aside at the end of it saying, hey, keep the team together because we can make a fortune in environmental. So it's, but it's the same stuff. So,
well, again, it's transferable skill sets, and that's awesome that you're able to take, environmental, hydrology, oil field technologies and apply them to, solving criminal cases. That's amazing.
Yeah. I'm just, the one I keep thinking about is lateral drilling. How cool would it be to come up with micro rigs? We're starting to see lateral drilling in environmental remediation.
Yeah.
And these guys, they've never even heard of it. I mean, the environmental hydro people, which goes back to transfer, technology transfer of the skill sets that the petroleum geologists or engineers have to bring to the environmental field. You would be amazed. You would be you'll be a god, in these industries because they've never heard of this stuff. But I'd like to really apply it.
Long laterals, horizontals, things like that for their spectrum of things.
Well, you got a dry cleaner at the shopping mall, and they've been dumping their nasty stuff down the drain, and so for years and years. So where's it going to go? What if you just dump it in the ground? Where's it going to go? It's going to go into basically paleo channels, and these are sinusoidal, which is like sinusoidal but different. And anyway, it's going to follow these pathways, and so the classic way of doing remediation is to start drilling vertical holes and building pump and treat plants above these things. Wait a minute, why don't you just go in with a lateral and just follow the channel down and do your recovery or your treatment along that single well. And if you propose that right now, they look at you like, well, that can't be done. And I like to say, well, I know some people who know how to do that, and they do it every day, all day long. And then I start telling them stories about going down 7,000 feet in half a day and kicking out almost 2 miles in 5 days, and then they really think I'm crazy. But so it's
got drillers and they rock.
but I think you guys seriously are you got a lot to offer in other industries, not just in petroleum, so and forensics for that matter. But I keep fantasizing about how to set up a little truck mounted geoprobe style rig where we could start doing directionals, because I would say that I've done more than 100 concrete searches where bodies under concrete, and I would love to not use a rock saw when we're done with the radar, but to actually come in from the side, and that way you don't have to reimburse the homeowner for their driveway or their parking or their garage or their basement. That would
hold on. You were finding bodies under people's driveways?
Yeah. We had
brilliant.
we had a great one in Phoenix years ago where Clark did this. Okay. And this girl, she got together with her sister. She's now an adult, and they said, "Hey, remember when we were little girls and Mom left us?" And I said, "Yeah, that was horrible. Mom left us, and we never heard from her ever again." Say, wasn't that the same night that Dad poured the concrete patio around the pool? So,
Serious?
oh yeah, no, this was
I'll
a
get
good
ready.
one. Yeah, and so she so Clark goes out there with a radar unit, gets three anomalies. The first one, the width was about the diameter of the drain pipe going out into the alleyway to drain the pool. The second one was really narrow. It was obvious. It's the power line going to the hot tub. The third one, about 4 feet wide, didn't make any. No, it was less than that, about 30 inches wide. Didn't make any sense. So they cut through the concrete, and she was there still with her daughters recognized her go to church dress, polka dot blue dress that she wore to church, and that guy, what was his name? Keitel, I think. I'm confusing people, but anyway, he probably thought he got away with that 20 years ago, and he
You
died in
did,
prison. Yeah.
technically.
Well, he died in prison. So
Well, good. But in that case, did the cops bring you in, or did they just say, hey, we have this weird feeling
no,
come
no,
check
no,
our
no.
pool?
The girls went to the cops. The cops came to us. We
Okay.
never worked directly with family or anything like that. Only exclusively law enforcement,
That
and
is
that
so
makes
cool.
life easier. Yeah, but that was a pretty good one. That was and anyway, that but concrete is very, very common in cases, and I've ruined entire parking or underground parking garages. So it's sad, but
I'm just going through like ways I can get rid of bodies eventually. So, you
blender, eat
know,
them.
huh?
Sorry.
Good.
Ew,
Well,
ew.
yeah, not starving yet, but you know,
So,
we are on the brink of change. You
yeah.
never know. But
So
oh my
no,
God, Jim,
just
this
be
is such
nice to
cool
people.
stuff. Just be nice. Yeah, I'm not nice. You can ask all my friends that too.
So that's it.
Jim, thank you so much. This was
So
so interesting. I love
it's
that
a
we were
pleasure.
able to link it to transferable skill sets. I love that it had murder in there. I mean, great ways to hide bodies. Do your mapping because it sounds like that's the most efficient way.
Yeah.
And I mean, if someone was ever interested in joining your group, someone who is in transferable skill, like has something that could be of use in the future, when do y'all recruit? How do you recruit? Or how do they begin the process of building a group for their local law enforcement? Because we know that local law enforcement is overwhelmed at times.
Oh
So if
yeah.
citizens
Yep.
get busy, maybe we have a lot less cold cases.
Absolutely. In fact, I would say, or to answer your question, as far as getting hold of any of us, get hold of me, or we have got a website, necrosearch.org, necrosearch.org.
I'll put it in the show notes.
Thank you. And the way it works is we have monthly meetings here in Denver, and down at the Highlands Ranch Law Enforcement Training Center. And although those have been on hiatus, we're now doing them through Zoom or something like that. And but the deal is that if somebody's interested, you have to sit in on at least a year's worth of monthly meetings. And the frustrating thing that drives me crazy is that whenever we discuss active cases, you have to leave the room or turn off your Zoom thing. So that's frustrating, but it's also a good litmus test for who's really serious. And then at the end of the year, we asked you to give a presentation on what you could bring to the group. Now, I can assure your viewers that you all have something. In terms of exploration or just doing science, everybody's got something to offer. If you were a bunch of boneheads, I would say nah, don't. But I know I know you're
engineers.
yeah, and even engineers, because at our research site we bury things, and so we can always bury engineers and see how the geophysics respond over them. So
Love to be the guinea pig.
anyway, seriously, it is. Everybody's got something to offer. And like we do I forgot to mention we do the research too. We've got all these pigs buried down there. So if you want to do research, if you don't want to do crime scene assistance, if you want to do crime scene stuff, that's great. And then if you want to do help with the training class, the 1-week class. That's a lot of work. But we, for like sister organizations and groups like that, if you've got anybody interested, let us know, and we can, because one of the things we want to do is use NecroSearch as a template for other organizations, and that's already taken place across the world. So by all means, necrosearch.org. So.
Cool. Well, I will be sure to link all that information to help y'all grow your base and, find those serious people that can do those transferable skill sets. So, Jim, thank you so much for taking the time today. That was so cool. Thank you for your murder stories, because I personally love it. And, if you're going to do it, like you said.
I'm wondering about you. So, all right. Hey, thanks a lot, Catherine.
Cool.
You take care.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to the Petroleum Underground, a segment of the Crude Audacity podcast. And remember, until next time, give them hell.
Bye now. Bye.